Welcome to Watchtower History.
This is one of your books, right, on that subject?
And that's one. That's one of
Yeah.
4 volumes. Yeah, Slabs of Dissonance. And about 200 cases I looked at.
And then this is another one that you're included in, Persuaded by the Evidence.
Yep, that covers my story. And so anyways, that's why I titled my autobiography 4 Times a Heretic, because I was a heretic professor, heretic evolutionist, heretic atheist, and heretic witnesses. But I go with the evidence. And the issue with evolution was there's simply unequivocal. There's no evidence for evolution. Never could have occurred. And I document this in about 1,000 publications, and it's just not there. And therefore, you really are forced, which is, of course, Romans 1:20 thing says that you can't deny the evidence. The heavens declare the glory of God, and you cannot deny the evidence. And I couldn't deny the scientific evidence for evolution. So
you became an intelligent
evolution.
design professor, intelligent design scientist, and I know that you studied the structure of the cell. If I remember you telling the story previous, and that the intelligent design of the cell was enough to convince you that there was intelligent design.
Oh yeah, the cell, how it works is absolutely amazing. And I could go into hours on this. And when you teach biology, and I of course taught biology at the college level, you cover the cell and you see how enormously complex it is and how it all works together. And you have many organelles in the cell, the mitochondria, the Golgi complex, the nucleus, the nucleolus, and so on, and how well this system works and how well designed it is. You also, when I was at the medical school, I learned so many diseases. If you have one single change in a number of certain diseases, one single change, and the DNA may be 1,000 base pairs long, one single change and the protein doesn't work and you have a disease. So you realize that you're not going to get humans or any animal by the accumulation of mutations. And that's what they teach. Or basically
the mutations kill.
Pardon? Mutations, well, kill, or most of them have no effect, but some of them kill. And the ones that have actually not no effect, but has a small effect, but they add up. They call these near neutral mutations. And near neutral mutations is like your car's got a little leak in the gas, no problem. You can drive it, you just fill it up with gas. But then something else, the carburetor gets messed up, or the fuel injection system gets messed up, and the water pump doesn't work anymore, and eventually the car fails. Well, in studying the near mutation concept, what happens is the near mutations build up, and eventually you have failure, and failure is death. So the reason we die is because the mutations add up, and eventually they create what they call genetic catastrophe, and then we die. And so we can see mutations in our life, and we can see that you're not going to get life by the accumulation of mutations. It's just not. It's not rational. It's not feasible. And so when you reject evolution, what other explanation do we have? The only other explanation really is either God created us, intelligent designer, or we evolve. When you show evolutions by science is not possible, then you're forced to accept the alternative view, which is creation, which is God. And the creation worldview fits. It fits the evidence of science. And therefore, I was forced, kind of like C.S. Lewis said, I was dragged, kicking and struggling against God, but eventually I was forced to accept the creator. And indeed, I realized that there's a creator, and therefore, then I started, of course, study the Bible more and realized a lot of what the Bible had to say was true. And a lot of problems in the world would not be there if we followed the Bible. So I realized that a lot of the moral teachings are very insightful and very true. And even among the churches, a lot of problems we see among the churches would not be there if we just followed the scriptures. And of course, we're humans and we sin, and therefore we don't always follow them, including me. And so you realize that this is the way, the truth, and the life. And you realize that there's a Savior and we're sinners and we need a Savior. And so the whole salvation issue comes to play.
That's the entire story right there, because without Christ, there's no hope for any of us. Right. Because of what he did on the cross. So that's the most important part of your story, we think. Where are you now spiritually?
Well,
What church are
I'm
you in? And
a pastor now of a church, a Methodist pastor of Emmanuel United Methodist Church, which is not too far from me. And so I'm forced to take a little bit different role than I've taken in the past. And it forces you really to spend a lot of time in study. Like the last sermon I gave was on angels. And I studied the many scriptures dealing with angels, and you really force you to get into the scriptures and try to understand some of these issues, which, as William Jennings Bryan said, the parts of the Bible I don't understand are not the ones that bother me. The parts that bother me are the ones I do understand. And so I mentioned that actually in my sermon because people asked questions later on. He said, well, if angels are chained up, how can you chain up a spiritual being? You know, they asked some good questions. Well, these are ones that I don't understand. And but let's focus on those that I do understand, that we understand. And so I think my atheist background helps me understand some questions that people have in the churches. I wish I could work with young people. And unfortunately, we've lost so many of the young people because they get one side in school and they never get the other side. Although when I was teaching, I was very careful not to mention Christianity because I was at class college. I taught it for 31 years. But I had students after class come up to me and say, I kind of pick up from your lectures that you're a Christian and I got a question. And then they would ask me questions about things that they were stumbling with. And so I was able to answer these quite effectively. And because I had the same questions and did the research to understand them. And I just wish we could reach the young people because so many accept the atheistic worldview based on information that's just not true, like they accept evolution.
when they start to accept that point of view, they start to doubt that the Bible as it's collected today is an inspired book. Have you done any research on the integrity of the Old Testament and New Testament
to
scriptures?
some degree, yeah, I have to some degree, and but that's an issue you could spend your lifetime studying.
Right. Yeah.
But you're right, and I probably will be doing more of that as time goes on, as I'm trying to cover certain things that I think should be covered in the church, and then cover some of these others later. But
out of curiosity, what made you choose the Methodist?
my wife was a Methodist. I've been married to her for 36 years, and we attended the Methodist Church now for 36 years since we were married in that church. And I didn't want to argue about religion. So I just, she grew up in that church, so I want to try to get along. So I attended the church for 31 years, and then I then wanted to speak as a lay speaker, and so I enrolled in the courses online that the Methodist Church offers, and took I think 8 courses, or I forget, 7 courses, and from those courses, I learned a lot about the Methodist Church, and they're pretty flexible. They're able to accept someone with a witness background. In fact, one of the first sermons I gave, and now I talked about some of the issues that came up. So they asked me to be a pastor, so I became such, and I thought this is a good opportunity. It's a small church, so I'm quarter time. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity I wanted to teach part-time, but I realized that my academic career was over. I'm not going to go back no matter what my record is. And so I realized that that's, it's too much on the internet, negative about my acceptance of the heresy of creationism and my rejection of the fact of evolution. So I realized that most colleges are not going to, I applied at 8 or 9, and I'm not ready to sit home and watch TV. I want to get out there and keep busy. And so this was an opportunity to get out there, and I enjoy the role as a pastor. I enjoy working with the people, and there are a lot of nice people. And so,
and you're still writing other books, I understand, as well.
And I have one on the Scopes trial, which I hope will be out sometime soon. I have another on C.S. Lewis, which is 3 times as long, which carefully documents my conclusion that C.S. Lewis, it surprises people when I say this, but I think C.S. Lewis was one of the most effective anti-evolutionists of the last century. Clearly one of the most effective.
Mere Christianity?
Pardon?
His book, Mere Christianity, or some other?
Well, his writing, his corpus writing as a whole. And he didn't cover the vestigial organ argument. He didn't cover natural selection. He didn't cover all the biology issues, but he covered the philosophical issues. And so I think he hit evolution as at the heart of the theory and why it was wrong. He was tactful. He made it very clear that he is an apologist and he better stick to his area. And he didn't want to start arguing biology. And he did argue biology with a student once or twice. And he felt he couldn't get anywhere. He just wasn't, people would say, well, what about all these useless organs? How do you explain that? Well, I don't know. I mean, I haven't studied the appendix or the tonsils or the adenoids, or I haven't studied. I don't know. So he realized that he could not answer these biological questions because that wasn't what he taught. But he could answer the philosophical, the nitty gritty questions of, does it make sense? Does it fit the world around us? And he did that very, very well. He did a poem on evolution, and I just had never read anything like it. And he talks about evolution is going, but where's it going? It's going up, but where's it going up to? And so he asked a lot of the real basic questions in that poem, which effectively, I think, helps one understand some major problems with evolution. And so that's why I had a lot of people, of course, it's commonly believed that he was a theistic evolutionist. And when my book came out, it did really well. It got on, I think, 300 libraries. And then I had people write and say, you should have used this argument. You forgot about this. And he said this when in 1929. And he said that. And he said the main reason he left, he became an atheist was evolution. The main reason he left because he rejected evolution. You need to talk about that more. And so I got enough feedback. I ended up with a 300 and some odd page book, which
Oh, wow.
I now am trying to get published. So it's much more definitive than my original book. And
That's
so,
always, it's a group effort sometimes. Sometimes the questions force you to research further. You also wrote a couple books here on Hitler and the Nazi Darwinian worldview and eugenics and the Holocaust.
right. One of the arguments that I came across quite early was evolution was really important in what Hitler was trying to do. He was looking at inferior races and superior races. And of course, the Aryan race, whatever that is, couldn't really define it very well. The Aryan race, which is Germans and Swedes and Norwegians and so on, that's the superior race. And the inferior race would be Jews and Negroes and Slavics and Poles and lots of other people. And this was really the centerpiece of the whole Holocaust. And he and his fellow scientists made it very clear what they were trying to do. They were trying to produce a superior race. We'd be a better world if we were all a member of the superior race. And so he said several times that when this is all over, people will congratulate me that I produced a superior race and I changed the world, and now we're a lot better place because we got rid of all these inferior races and now we're all the part of the superior race. And so that came up over and over and over in his writings. And of course, when I studied history in college, I have a minor in history, that came up as well. And so I did more and more reading, and I realized that Darwinism was central to Adolf Hitler's ideas. Now, I don't think there's any evidence that he read Darwin, but Darwin convinced a number of the leading scientists like Ernst Haeckel in Germany and all of his colleagues in the department that he was in, biology, to accept evolution. And the first language that Darwinism was, his book Origin of Species was translated in was, of course, German. And so Hitler was just echoing what his scientists in Germany believed. And so he didn't see that as, why would you object to what I'm saying? I'm just repeating what the eminent scientists at the University of Jena and others believe. So what's the problem? And they did, by and large, they supported him. In fact, the medical doctors and professors, with few exceptions, strongly supported Adolf Hitler and the Holocaust. And so therefore, I've done a couple of books. I have a couple more books I'm working on that deal with that. So the evidence is overwhelming that Darwinism was a central factor in bringing about the Nazi movement as well as World War II. And that was also important, of course, in Eisenhower's response. He was a creationist, studied creationism when he was young. And
Eisenhower's family, just before you get there, Eisenhower's family had been Jehovah's Witnesses. So
right.
Eisenhower actually
Bible
has
students back then. They were Bible students back then. And the Bible students is different than the Jehovah's Witnesses. Rutherford came along and he was the one who changed the Watchtower to be something very different. So, and Eisenhower is very influenced, of course, by his mother. And he accepted one level, well, he accepted more as time went on. And one thing that really he made it very clear was, I hate war, but I hate the Nazis even more. And the reason I hate the Nazis is because of their ideas of inferior race, the Holocaust, and their concerns about the Jews and Slavics. And he knew that he recognized that as a central problem. And when they, of course, we prevailed in World War II, he saw firsthand what they did. And Eisenhower basically said, I want this documented because in time, they're going to deny, the world, so many are going to deny that this ever occurred. I want this the best documented event in history. And he had enormous documentation, films, movies, interviews, thousands and thousands of pages of documentation. And he made it very clear that his major concern was, I mean, he liked to win wars, that was part of it, but his major concern was what Germany was doing, the Holocaust. And
have you included any United States involvement and their views on the eugenics back in that time? For instance, the Kellogg, Kennedys, for certain families, their viewpoints on it, Planned Parenthood, organizations like that.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure he was concerned to some degree about that, but there wasn't much concern in the United States at that time anyway. So, and there's been a number of studies that basically found pretty clearly that America was very, very influential in what the Germans did. And during, of course, the trial of Nuremberg, that basically says, look, why are you condemning us? We got these ideas directly from you guys. We relied upon your own Supreme Court decisions. So why should you condemn us for what we were doing? And of course, our response was, we were just sterilizing thousands of people. You were killing them. That's the difference. The worst contributor to the Holocaust was IBM on their computers. And if it wasn't for their computers, I think they probably would have lost the war a lot sooner, because they had the issue of, you got to get trains to the troops, you got to get supplies to the troops, you got to ship the Jews to the concentration camps. And there's a lot of logistics. You have a lot of things to deal with. And the IBM, at that time, I think it was another called Holocaust, Holograph, I forget, company. And so they had to figure this out. And towards the end, the choice is that the material to the troops or the Jews to the camps. And evidently Hitler and some of his comrades said, we need to get rid of the Jews first, because that will be remembered for forever. We lose the war, well, it's not that bad. At least we got rid of the Jews, and that's good. And of course, they only killed 6 million out of 10 million, so they had a lot longer to go to get it. But towards the end is when they killed most of the Jews, and that's because, of course, the trains were, instead of bringing supplies to the soldiers, and that, of course, I think was very important in losing the war, because they didn't have clothes, didn't have food, and the soldiers were losing the war because they were starving to death, they were freezing to death, because they didn't have these things, because the choice was to bring the Jews to the camps.
Now, imagine a mindset where you would lose a war to exterminate a people you're not even fighting with. I mean, they weren't at war with the Jews per se on a battlefield. They were out on a battlefield with others, yet a main focus is to exterminate an entire group of people. It's quite a mind-boggling thought process.
I've been to the Holocaust Museum in Detroit and one in Washington, D.C. that I've been to. It just boggles my mind that some people deny that the Holocaust ever happened. Have you written anything on that or done any research?
Oh yeah, I have a number of books which they wrote, which basically they argue, well, there were people killed, but they were in jail for good reasons. They were Jews that were stealing and were corrupt bankers, and it wasn't that many. It was thousands. It wasn't 6 million, and so on. So they argue about a lot of these things. So in fact, I was influenced by Adolf Hitler. He was a Swede who basically was involved in this Holocaust denial movement. So I'm aware of it. And Eisenhower knew that would happen. And so he was very perceptive in realizing we've got to document this. And I'm not sure how many buildings they have of the documentation, but there's not many things that happened during any war that we've so well documented. So Eisenhower is right in doing that.
Now, did Eisenhower remain a Christian of some sort in his later life?